I have 5 questions for you that I'd like you to answer, please. And
Okay.
I'll go ahead with the first one. Um, why should members of your party vote for you instead of your primary opponent?
Well, I think it's important to note, look, both Don and I are friends. We get along. Neither of us want to be in this situation. But when you really look at what the two are, Don's basically redefining his record. But when you look at his record, he supported things like Cash for Clunkers, which I think every Republican out there would agree was a failed program that really just shows that a belief that the government is the best to fix the economy. I believe it's the free market. One of the largest earmarkers among the Illinois delegation. And so there's all those issues that come into play. But most importantly, I don't think Washington is meant to be as a career. I think it's meant to be something you do as a response to the needs of your district. And Don's going for his 21st year in Congress, and I'm going for my third. And I think the question that folks really need to ask is, what can Don do in the next 2 years that he hasn't been able to do in the first 20? And I think it's time for new generational leadership in Washington and, frankly, getting away from the problems we've been having both under Republicans and Democrats.
What particular expertise would you use in Congress to help bring jobs to the Sauk Valley?
Well, it's a couple of things. Number one, it's not necessarily that congressmen go to Washington, D.C. and become experts on everything. The expertise is being able to surround yourself with folks that know what they're doing. When it comes to the economy and we talk about jobs, number one, the best people that know how to create jobs are not Washington bureaucrats or even Washington politicians, it's small business owners. And so I would surround myself, as I've already done, with people that understand job creation. And they tell me things like we need to repeal Obamacare, we need to simplify the tax code, we need to create a regulatory environment that makes sense and is not overregulation. So I've surrounded myself with those folks. We're doing an initiative in our district called the One More Jobs Initiative, where we ask all small business owners, what do you need to create one more job? And then we have compiled those lists and delivered them to Senator and the President. So that's the kind of issues there. But the other issue, too, where I think the 16th District can play a real role is in energy security and energy independence. It's a very energy-intense district, and I see that over the next 10 or 20 years, frankly, energy is going to be, it still continues to be our weak point, an area that we need to improve. And frankly, I think our district can play a very strong role in that. So I'd love to see energy-related jobs come here, and I'd love to see us finally realize that it's not Washington, D.C. that's going to bring manufacturing back. It's going to be manufacturers and coming to an environment that they can compete in. So that's the kind of expertise we need.
Great. Our third question is, what is the most important thing Congress can do to improve the education system in America?
Well, look, I think the role of the federal government in education is to provide for funding equalization in areas that don't have money, ensuring that the proper resources are there. I think where we run into trouble is when we try this one-size-fits-all education policy out of Washington. We've seen that, for instance, in the No Child Left Behind. So I think what can Washington do? I think we continue to make sure that school districts are having the resources they need and ultimately not saddling them with unfunded mandates, with requirements that we're making them do, but we're not giving them money to carry through. All you're doing is setting up schools for failure at that point. So the key is to help fund and get out of the way and let states and local districts really make decisions on how to best educate their children.
Are you a supporter of the No Child Left Behind Act?
I think it definitely needs tweaked and fixed. And look, in theory, No Child Left Behind sounded very good. In practicality, it hasn't worked. And my mother's a public school teacher, so I get to hear about it a lot. And how you have teachers that spend most of their time teaching to the test instead of educating children. And so I think the act has not worked, and I think there needs to be some serious fixes. Another focus that I'd like to see in education too is to begin to allow kids in high school and maybe even younger to begin to explore different trades that they may be interested in. If a kid's very interested in welding, why should he have to wait until he's out of trade school to really get to practice that? Maybe in high school, talk about helping them branch out to work with a local business to understand if they want to weld or if they want to, repair things or whatever, or work on autos. So to allow kids to begin to explore trades, I think even in high school is a very important part of the future. And ultimately, you've got to focus on that STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It's an area where, frankly, we've been lacking recently, and that needs to be a new focus on those areas.
Okay. Our fourth question is, under what circumstances do you think it is appropriate for the U.S. to enter into or start war?
I think to protect our interests and frankly, ultimately to protect the interest of our allies. I think when you look at the situation that we see today in Iran, and you understand that Iran is on the verge of attaining a nuclear weapon, the last thing in the world I'd want to see in Iran is military strikes. But I actually say that to say the very last thing in the world I'd want to see is a nuclear-armed Iran, because that both affects our interest in the Middle East. It's very dangerous to our allies in the Middle East, such as Israel. It would start a race to nuclearization, including Saudi Arabia. So I think when it comes to protecting American interests, and only as a last resort should war ever be used. But in many cases, keeping the option of war on the table and having a strong military is the best thing we can do to ensure that we never go to war in the first place.
Our fifth question is, what have you learned about the Sauk Valley, the Dixon-Lee County area, that you did not know before you began the campaign?
It's as far as area specifically. I mean, it's a lot like I currently represent. I mean, when you look down just south of Lee County, frankly, in whether it's LaSalle, whether it's Bureau, they fight a lot of the same battles. You see a disappearing manufacturing base. You see high joblessness. You see people that are concerned about the price at the pump, people that feel left out by Washington, and ultimately you see people that are just concerned with the national debt. So as far as what I've learned specifically, it's a beautiful, Lee County's an amazing county, actually. It's really neat. And as a congressman, I'll be proud to represent, Ronald Reagan's birthplace. It's a great talking point from that, and to be able to say that. But I see a lot of the same challenges that I've seen in my year in Congress and even my year leading up to running for Congress. So it's an area I'm excited to represent.